to the time of review as we seek to solidify our reading and put it back into the storyline of the Bible. I also want to congratulate you because we're reading some of the most difficult episodes in Israel's history. We're reading through some of the difficulties that we don't understand about what Jeremiah's facing and some of the things that he's instructed to do. We definitely don't understand some of the object lessons that God has given the children of Israel through Ezekiel and so on. And so what you have here is God. I think about these passages in light of something that someone asked me many years ago. When we began reading through the chronological Bible as a church, I had one of our Sunday school teachers come to me and in the midst of reading through Ezekiel, and he said, Miss Ava, you had to be from Mississippi to understand that he dropped down to deep Mississippi when he said this. But he said, do you really believe that Ezekiel laid on his side for those however many days it was and he ate food cooked over dung and so on? And I said, oh, absolutely, I believe this, because what you see is the tenacity of God. He is going after his people. And it's like when you have a rebellious child, you will stand on your head. You'll do everything possible to deliver that child from themselves. And that's the same way God does with his people. That's why he has his prophets do some of the strangest things that's recorded in Scripture. Well, one particular scene stood out from this last week's reading that I think really does capture what is taking place in Israel globally. So Jeremiah has a vision of 2 baskets of figs. One basket of figs, they're ripe, they're luscious, and they're edible. The other basket of figs are bad and inedible. They're useless. And so what you have here is regarding the basket of the bad, inedible figs, these are the ones who are going to remain in the land after Judah goes into captivity by the Babylonians. And why is there a separation here? Because God is not finished with those edible eggs. He's invested in that basket of good fruit because those are the ones that he's going to bring back to the land that he promised Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, the land of promise that he's given them. Those good figs has nothing to do with the fact that there's something valuable about them in and of themselves, or that they're righteous, or they're performing to the level that God has required of them as a people. No, this basket is saying that I'm going to bring these people back to this land, and I'm going to fulfill the promise that I'd made to Abraham and to Israel's forefathers. Also during this period, you see that Jeremiah is also writing. He's writing letters. He writes a letter to those who've been taken into captivity there into Babylon in the first wave, and he writes them a letter to encourage them. You know what? You're not going to come back in 2 years' time. Doesn't matter what the false prophets are telling you. You're not coming back until 70 years are finished. So what you need to do while you're there, you need to build houses. You need to get a life and plant vineyards and so on. Why? Because you're going to be there for a bit of time. Because God is going to allow them to stay there so that several things. So they'll appreciate the land that God has given them, that they will despise being under slavery again. Wow, they've gone back into slavery like they did thousands of years ago with the Egyptians. You see, he also writes a book. In this book that God commands him to write, he commands him to give him promises about the future and so on. So what you see God doing in the midst of this, that God's plan is not stalled. God has not put his agenda on hold because of his bad people, because of his bad figs. You see, even in the midst of the judgment that they are experiencing, the consequences of prolonged disobedience, God's agenda is not prolonged. God's agenda is still working on time. That God is letting his people know in advance that he's going to give them a new heart, that he's going to remove that heart of stone. Because what you see throughout the story, you just see the hardness of people's heart. And one of the things I have really appreciated and understood is the more I understood the storyline of the Old Testament is I am Israel. I am Judah. My heart is just like that. And it begs us to look at our hearts and to realize, those who don't know Christ, that the problem is me. I have a hard heart, and God promises to remove the heart of stone and give them a heart of flesh. The Spirit of God will come back inside and dwell in mankind. So what you see from this last week's reading, in fact, all of the Old Testament, you see that God is controlling history, and he's in charge of the outcome. The Assyrians aren't, the Egyptians aren't, and certainly Israel are not in charge of history. God is.